Our first guest, David Plouffe, is all about bringing people together around common causes. He was manager of Senator Barack Obama's Come From Behind 2008 presidential campaign. Then he was senior advisor to President Obama. He's now senior advisor to Harris for president. He has a BA from the University of Delaware. He's a Blue Hen, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Audacity to Win. David Plouffe, welcome to Axios. David, thank you so much for joining Axios.
Always good to be with you, Mike.
And we welcome our Axians around the world who are joining us on live stream. David, this morning you stopped by a Pennsylvania delegation breakfast, and you told me backstage there was a distinct energy.
Yeah, it did remind me a lot of 2008. So, there was energy, people all throughout the state, all 67 counties, Governor Shapiro, Mayor Parker, Mayor of Pittsburgh. I've been around politics a long time, and you kind of know when people are all in. And people are in an athletic posture to help figure out how to get those 19 electoral votes for Kamala Harris. And folks in that room have won tough races the last few cycles. So, yeah, it's an energy of how can I help? What can I do? And you love to see it, because to win a battleground state like that and the other battleground states, it requires that kind of effort. You got to have the candidate performing at a high level. You got to have a good theory of the case, but you got to have folks on the ground who know the state well, organizing and making it happen and reaching your vote goals. So I love to see that. I also stopped by the Delaware breakfast where they gave me an awesome 302 Blue Ends hat, so I appreciate that.
So your best merch so far of the convention.
It is my best merch, yes.
Very nice. And what you said, the folks at the Pennsylvania, you were talking about the '08 energy. You said people are ready to roll. What do you mean by that?
It's just like, what can I do? What do we need to do to get the number of votes we need in my county, in my precinct, in my state? And how can I help? And also giving advice, because they know the state well. So, that's what it takes to win. You need motivated people from all walks of life. And, you look at the donations and the volunteer sign-up so far to Kamala Harris, well over 50% of the people have never contributed or volunteered before. And again, I know in the Obama days, that was such a unique thing. Why does that matter? When someone in a community gets involved in a campaign who their friends and family members and neighbors have never seen got involved in politics, it makes them super interested. Why are you doing this? Tell me more about that. And so obviously the effort matters, but when you've got people who have never been involved in politics before, spending time on something, that gets noticed by other people in their circle, and that's what's super important.
Now, David, you're senior advisor to the Harris for President campaign, and you joined the campaign in motion, in progress, when it became the Harris-Walz campaign instead of the Biden-Harris campaign. I'm told that the campaign thought of you. They knew that you were the ultimate A-list in politics. They knew they wanted you if they could get you. You have a pretty good life. What made you willing to suit up?
Well, that was already an A-list campaign. Jen O'Malley Dillon is just a tremendous campaign manager. So, listen, I think I'm no different than all the other people around the country who are signing up to help. It's a unique circumstance. At that point, we had less than 100 days left. You gotta jump in and do all you can to do. And I've known Kamala Harris for a long time. Admire her, really like her as a person. Think she'd be a great president. And so that's what's really been encouraging. Whether you're a grassroots volunteer, at the precinct level in North Carolina or Pennsylvania, or you're people like me who've been involved in politics, everybody's willing to answer the call to do what they can. Obviously, this has been a campaign that's had a lot of change, and she's got a lot to do to introduce herself to the country, reintroduce herself to the country, lay out what she wants to do, how that contrasts with Trump, and execute these big moments like the convention, the first debate. So I think, you got to be willing to jump in. I think the future of the country is at stake, and so nothing I'd rather be doing right now than helping her become our 47th president.
What is your theory about how much she should fill in? People seem to like what they know now. What is your thinking about filling out biography, policy? Like, do they need to go deeper, or how do you approach that?
Well, first of all, biography is important. Values are important. How you grew up. She grew up, middle class family, her sister and her mom. Lessons she learned there informs how she'll act as president and all the things she's accomplished on behalf of people. Super important, particularly compare that to Trump, who's never really known sitting at that kitchen table trying to make it all work. It's all come easy to him. He doesn't understand what people who have to live within a budget go through. Every speech she gives, she's engaging with reporters on the trail as well. She's laying out what she do on Medicare and Social Security, on health care, on taxes. She gave a speech on cost cutting. So she'll continue to lay in detail, but I think the American people like what they're seeing because A, she's a breath of fresh air. Two, I think she's delivering a searing message about how she would focus on the middle class compared to Trump. And on things like health care, on abortion, she's being very, very detailed out there. So listen, I know this question, how much detail in it? Listen, I've run presidential campaigns, okay? There are a bunch of different things. They're going to diners and bars and community events. They're giving speeches. They're going big convention. There are debates. There's interviews. There are town halls. There's engaging with influencers, a new, very important part of politics. She will and do all of that. And so the key thing is, the way I think about it is when people start voting, and we don't have election day in this country anymore, we have election month. So you don't have 77 days, you basically have 47 days. In the next 47 days, can people know as much about her background, her biography, the things she'd accomplished as a prosecutor and attorney general, what she wants to do as president, and then very importantly, for people to understand the stakes if Donald Trump's president. Project 2025, Trump's blueprint to become a dictator and really devastate the economy. His tariff is a sales tax of 20% on most products that Americans buy, would devastate. Economists say it would be almost a $4,000 tax increase on the middle class. Obviously, a third of the country lives under Trump abortion bans because the thing he seems most proudest about is his role in overturning Roe v. Wade. And we have to make sure voters understand he's not going to stop there. So there's a lot to get done, and there'll be many different ways to do that. And that's really the job of the campaign, is make sure you're reaching people where they are.
When you make small talk with David Plouffe, you're talking about the battleground map. So let's plunge in to the battleground states. How big is the map really?
Well, right now, it's 7 states in the congressional district of Nebraska. I would say 2 things about that. I think a month ago, I think it would have been hard for Democrats to compete in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, or North Carolina to win. I think those are all back now as credible states Kamala Harris could win. And secondly, Donald Trump and his brain trust, and I use that word loosely, we're running around talking about Minnesota, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, all these states that are now out of reach for Trump. So I think it's 7 states, and that's important. That gives Kamala Harris many pathways to get the 270 electoral votes, all a little bit different in terms of how you get there. Some are going to be much more focused on turnout, some on swing, but it takes all of that, and a good campaign knows exactly how you're going to reach your win number in those states. And it's a combination of new registrants, turnout, vote share amongst your base, and winning the true undecideds. And I think Kamala Harris has greatly improved the position of the Democratic Party in this race. We have a lot of work to do. 16 was super close, 20 was super close, 24 will be super close. And we're preparing for a race that'll come down to a vote or 2 per precinct. And I think we have the field organization in all those states, which is super important. People matter. People working in local offices in those communities every day, all those volunteers, even if that volunteer only reaches 1 or 2 people that day who may say, okay, now I'm going to vote, or now I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. If you think about that effort in the aggregate, it makes a huge difference. When states could come down to states, 8, 10, 12, 15,000 votes, it matters a great deal.
How much do you worry about Nevada, and how seriously do you take North Carolina?
I think North Carolina is winnable. I think, by the way, an important dynamic there is Mark Robinson, the gubernatorial candidate, is even more MAGA than Trump, which is saying something. And so we should win that governor's race by some margin. And so when you're engaged in politics, just like in business, you want to know, like, who are my customers? In politics, who's actually available to me? There's a bunch of people who right now are voting Democrat for governor who aren't yet Democrat for president. So we need to run a campaign to them. Huge opportunity. Nevada's always going to be tough. So you ask, listen, if you're involved in a presidential campaign, the minute you feel secure about a battleground state, you ought to get out of the business. Like, you always got to be worried about getting across the finish line. But we see how Nevada has become much more competitive. Great field organization there. I think Kamala Harris is a great candidate for Nevada. And so she's going to be spending time in all those states. Tim Walz will be, other surrogates, great field operations. So the key thing is you want to keep them all in the zone of probability. And right now, I think there's more pressure on Donald Trump from an electoral college standpoint than Kamala Harris. And that's a big change from where we were 4 weeks ago.
Two things for Vice President Harris to worry about. One, she's riding an enviable wave, will be written about as one of the incredible turnarounds in political history. And yet you've been around the block, as you mentioned at the top. You know those waves don't last.
Well, I'd say a couple things. We saw last night, again, reminded what an amazing person and President Joe Biden was. But it's just a fact that a lot of Americans were not thrilled about the rematch. So now they've got a new matchup, and they're excited about it, number one. And I think that's not going to dissipate. I think people are going to be excited all the way through to Election Day. Yes, but why? She's gotten off to a great start because she's done great. And I'm a student of political history, as are you. There's a lot of people who look like the next thing, who when you get on that presidential stage, campaign stage, which is the most withering scrutiny, the hottest spotlights, most people don't come out whole. They wither. She's met the moment, and I think people see that, and they think she's ready for this, number one. I have no doubt we'll make mistakes. There'll be moments where the press in particular puts us in the barrel, as we used to say in Obama days. There's going to be days where we're in the penalty box, but all you can do is control what you can control, which is if you're communicating the message you want to communicate to the people you think will decide the presidency, and you've got the organization in place, and they're making good decisions and progress every day, that's what's important. So she's gotten off to a great start because she's done great. And I think we'll see Thursday night a continuation of that. Obviously, you know, getting on the road. I think campaigning much more vigorously than Donald Trump is. I still believe that matters. We only have 77 days, so every day you're in a battleground state, in a county, in a community. It's a big win for you. And I think she and Tim Walz are going to. I'm curious why Trump's not campaigning more aggressively. You covered it in 2016. He was. I won't give him credit for many things. He campaigned hard. In 20, he was out there a lot, in part because he was irresponsible around the pandemic. But he's got a really lazy schedule.
And yet not much seems to be sticking to him. What do you have that will stick to him?
Well, listen, he's going to get 46 to 48% of the vote. That's just a fact. Our goal and necessity is to get a little more than that. So, but what is sticking to him? In every battleground state, from a research perspective, there are more than 50% of the people who'd rather not a return of Trump, okay? So I wish that was 65. It should be, it's not. That's the country we're living in right now. Trump's got a big base of support, but we've got to tap into that, number one. Number two, Project 2025, I think, is going to stick to him. By the way, we've all had to kind of become amateur analysts of Donald Trump in the last 8 to 9 years. This guy doesn't like to run away from much. He doesn't like to back down. He's running, scurrying as fast as he can from Project 2025. Why? He knows it's going to hurt him. And by the way, his fingerprints are all over it. His DNA's all over it. His footprints are all over it. This is his blueprint. And it's not just the substance of 2025. They've got a database of people they want to bring into the government, MAGA loyalists, to enact it. So that's important. Abortion's hugely important to make sure you remind people of the story. The reason that 1/3 of the country lives under Trump abortion bans is because of Trump. His party will try and pass a national abortion ban. If they own Congress, you don't think he's going to sign it? Talking about criminalizing doctors, monitoring women who are pregnant. They clearly are anxious to go after IVF and other forms of fertility. Like, their assault on women and women's health is unprecedented. And so does every voter know all that? No, they don't. So I think we can do a good job over the next 77 days on his agenda, on abortion, on tax cuts. She's going to give a middle-class tax cut. He's going to pass on a sales tax to all the middle-class families in this country. There's a lot we can do. But the steady state of the race is Donald Trump's not going down to 40 or 42 or 44. That's just the reality. He's going to get his vote. We just got to get a little bit more.
A specific vulnerability for Vice President Harris, Mike Murphy, the longtime Republican consultants said on Morning Joe this morning that if they can keep Donald Trump on a teleprompter, if they can get him on the right meds, that Republicans know how to run against a progressive from San Francisco. What do you do about that vulnerability?
Well, listen, I think for those of you who don't live in battleground states, you don't see the campaign as it's unfolding day to day, right? But if you're in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, you see we're running ads that are talking about all her work as a prosecutor and attorney general, going after transnational gangs, going after sexual predators, holding them accountable. So we're going to tell the story. She's been motivated by protecting women and children and families. So I would say they know how to run that. They've been trying to run it for 30 or 40 years. This ain't the 80s. So, we're sensitive to the attacks. We'll respond to them in kind. We're also going to be on offense. And by the way, let's talk about Trump. Candidates matter more in a presidential campaign than any other race. They matter in every other race. But everybody sees these people. We're going to have one, maybe more debates. People are going to watch that. They're watching very carefully because who the American president is matters to people. And you watch him day to day. He is a detriment to their campaign. And so when Mike says if they can keep him on the teleprompter, that's right. He's a 78-year-old former president. We talk about him like a child, okay? If he can't execute basics about talking about what he wants to do we really want this guy with the nuclear codes sitting in the Situation Room, sitting in the Oval Office? So, yes, I think candidate-wise, Kamala Harris is reaching people. She's communicating with them in a way that clearly they are finding to be effective, and Donald Trump's not. So a campaign, yes, it's ads, yes, it's field operation, all important, but the most important thing in a presidential campaign is the candidate.
You mentioned at least one debate in September on ABC. What is the likelihood there will be a second debate in October?
Well, we'll see if he shows up. Not 100% sure he shows up.
What do you think is the chance that that does not occur?
I don't know. I don't want to get in his brain. I don't know. But we'll see. We're going to prepare like he's going to be there. I hope he does. And then we'll see where we are. There's obviously going to be a vice presidential debate, which is great. And I think, listen, that debate is so important for Kamala Harris because there will still be many people in America who don't know as much about her as Donald Trump or even Joe Biden. She's got an opportunity to talk about her background, what she wants to do, and on a stage with him. And so I think that I've been involved in a lot of debates through the years. They're always challenging because you can plan and practice all you want, but when the bell goes off, things happen that you're not anticipating, whether the question, your opponent. But she is someone who I think she knows why she's running. She knows what she stands for. She knows the threat that Donald Trump presents, and I think she'll be eager to prosecute that case. So it'll be a really important moment.
She's been talking more about freedom, less about democracy, as President Biden had been. Why that switch?
Well, listen, I think freedom encompasses a lot of things. Obviously, freedom is, freedom for women to make their own health care decisions, freedom for people to read the books they want to read, but freedom is also living in a country where the person who gets the most votes wins, where losers actually still love their country. So that's going to be an important part of the election. And when you talk to swing voters out in battleground states, the fact that Trump is saying, again, he's not going to basically embrace the election results, he never conceded last time, that bothers people, okay? And this is unique to Trump. I mean, in 2022 in the congressional elections, Kari Lake was an outlier, there was a few others. But for the most part, Republicans who lost their elections conceded their opponent, congratulated their opponent. Democrats, of course, did that. This democracy requires that the people who don't win elections respect the results. So that's a very important part of the frame. But I think freedom is something that she feels strongly about. I think it covers a lot of issues. I think it's also aspirational, and I think it's working for her.
And was it that democracy was more backward looking?
No, I think she talks about democracy in every speech. Democracy will be part of speeches tonight, Wednesday, Thursday. But at the end of the day, I think freedom really does cover a lot of important areas to the American electorate. And of course, the flip side is Donald Trump is a threat to all those things. When someone basically says they want to be a dictator on day one, when they talk about their role models, talks about Putin and Xi and Orban, that gives you a pretty good sense of how that person wants to act as president. He does not want guardrails. By the way, Project 2025, Trump's blueprint, if you're to win, a lot of it is about removing the guardrails. So Donald Trump can be an all-powerful, all-encompassing figure in our lives. And I think that's going to be a very important part of the election. There's not, maybe 40% of the people would be okay with that. There's 60% of the people that don't want Trump to be given that kind of absolute power.
We're about to get the hook for all our Chicago friends here, readers of Axios Chicago. This is hometown night at the convention. It's Obama night at the conventions. We'll have speeches from both the former First Lady, the former president. You've worked with both of them on speeches for many years, and you had a little musical analogy for the way that the two approach.
Well, first, it always is great to be back here in Chicago. And thank you for this weather. I mean, it could be 95 and muggy. I mean, this is remarkable. And it's great for all the delegates who are here. So I think in their preparation, I'd say, Michelle Obama has always been a little bit more of the concert pianist. Her speech is done a little bit earlier. He's a little bit more of the jazz musician riffing a little bit. But I will not spill any secrets, but I think the people in the hall tonight, those watching at home, I will say an important part of a convention audience is actually people who won't watch the convention tonight, but we'll see clips the next day on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. And even though, they're not in their 20s anymore, I think that they are people who will say interesting things tonight that interesting people will want to share, and will reach a lot of those hard-to-reach voters. But stay tuned. I think these are two really important speeches tonight, and I think they're going to do a lot of good for Kamala Harris.
What can President Obama do for Vice President Harris?
Well, first of all, he can set the stakes of the election, the world, what America will look like if Kamala Harris is president, and what it'll look like if Donald Trump is president. He knows Kamala Harris very well. He can talk about her values, some of the things they've worked on together through the years, and the kind of person she'll be, and kind of how she sees the world. I think that was one of his great strengths as an elected official, as a president, is his biography, how he grew up. He saw the world through the window of people who are middle class, trying to get in the middle class. She is the same way. And I think that's super powerful. And I think he can excite people about her and about the stakes. And I think that's what he intends to do tonight.
I don't think Mrs. Obama would mind me mentioning that a fun fact is she has outsold the president in books.
Just don't say that to him. Yes.
He knows it's true.
Oh, I know he does. Yeah.
What is the power that she could bring as a surrogate for Vice President Harris?
Well, she's just an incredibly popular and well thought of leader in America. Kind of crosses age, party, demography. And she doesn't speak out that often about politics. And so when she does, I think people are super interested in what she has to say. She knows Kamala Harris personally. I think she'll speak as someone who knows her well and believes that not just does she have the right ideas, but this is the kind of person you want in the Oval Office as your president. So whenever she speaks, it does seem to get really outsized attention. And again, I think the delegates will like it. I think those sitting at home watching the convention tonight will like it. But those tens of millions of people are going to vote in this election who are not going to watch the convention. But we'll see some clips. Clips from her speech will be the kind of content that they want to engage in and share.
And as we say goodbye, one fun thing, you've known the vice president going back to 2007, right? Tell me what she's like behind the scenes, how she's grown, maybe one encounter you've had with her off camera.
Well, I'm just impressed again by how she's met this moment. I mean, think about it. One day you're the vice president, you're thinking about how to help the president get reelection. The next day you're the nominee and the biggest news story on the globe. And I think she's met it with grace and with joy and confidence. Yeah, I've noticed since 2007. I mean, I met Kamala Harris for the first time in Iowa. She was the district attorney in California, in San Francisco County, and she was out knocking on doors. And she did it, if I recall, it was about, well, Mike, you might remember, it was below zero. She got there every day knocking on doors. Elected official, no different than the average volunteer in Iowa. She gets grassroots politics. It's what she believes in. And she's really funny and warm. She's just a really good human being. And I actually think that matters. Like, I think Trump's wrong on just about every policy under the sun. I don't think he has respect for our Constitution. I don't think he has respect for allies. He's also not a good person. And call me quaint, but I think that matters. And she's a very, very good person who I think would be an amazing president, but also an amazing role model as our president.
And sounds like willing to work.
Yeah, roll up the sleeves, do the work.
Thank you, Chicago, and thank you, David Plouffe.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for a great conversation.
Okay. Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.